Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, lads and lads. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Apologies for no overtime this week, but yeah, we're going to be doing a short video. Not going to be the most advanced analysis in the world, but we're just going to be wrapping things through quickly about the matches last week and predictions for next week. So, Ground Zero Gaming, they lost to Melbourne Mavericks 3-1. Congratulations to Melbourne Mavericks, once again showing up when they're needed. To be honest, I'm surprised it wasn't a 4-0 with how Ground Zero were playing. I thought they looked absolutely abysmal. Of course, they did have Choco and Jungle Jazz swapping through constantly, so they do have that excuse, and I'm not going to talk about the oily politics situation. That's not my job. My job is to talk about the games, and I don't really care for that. So yeah, this was unfortunate because both of these teams at their peak level would have probably had a much more interesting series. But yeah, we're OCE, we're used to having great disappointments like that, much like the end game for Wednesday on March the 6th too. So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. So yeah, Melbourne Mavericks, good on them. I think they do definitely have great potential when they're not on GOATs as well with DPS compositions. I think Winter and Nami have the potential to have really great synergy of like Pharah and Widowmaker. And they do lean themselves towards very natural aggressive play. Like, people were saying that, oh yeah, these guys are a really great GOATS team last season, but to be honest, GOATS wasn't really, and tanky compositions weren't their jam. They were always going to be a more dive-centric team, and once they do get really aggressive, then I think their younger mechanical sort of players can really shine into their own armor. So yeah, props to Melbourne Mavericks. Should have been a 4-0 in my opinion. It's a miracle that Ground managed to get one from there, and this most likely means in terms of seeding and playoffs, because Ground Zero have neither gone against Drop Bears and Order, that it's not going to be very likely that they're going to be attending LAN this season just due to seedings, because they're most likely, if things go to plan, most likely going to be going against Drop Bears or Order the first round of playoffs, so that's going to be very difficult, of course, if we stick to the schedule, the predictions of what should happen theoretically. So this is an absolutely massive win for Melbourne Mavericks. Blank Esports versus Mindfreak. So yeah, once again, congratulations to Blank Esports. Mindfreak are going to be a very interesting team to watch in the future, because they just seem to manage to get one map off like these, what I would consider the top tier teams in the region. Blank, I still think have a few question marks around them, and I think this is probably going to be their best chance yet they've had in a very, very long time to try and contest that top 2 slot with both Sydney Drop Bears and Order. There we go. Because yeah, those two have really been top of the table for such a long time, clashing against each other, and there hasn't been really that many teams, but besides like Dark-Sided, to really contest that. And it's good that we're finally seeing some potential unlocked within that roster with the new coaching stuff, of course, new main tank as well. So yeah, hopefully that ends up sorting themselves out, and I'm really keen to see what Blank produce in the future. Mindfreak, though, the fact that they are taking these maps on a consistent basis means that they certainly do have room to grow. And if we're looking like as a sort of reflection on sort of past Serenity, when they were constantly getting one map off like top tier teams within like Open Division and starter contenders, that's how they evolved into what they are now in the Melbourne Mavericks, you know. Just one map, and then they started evolving throughout season to season. Mindfreak, that could perhaps happen too. In saying that, Mindfreak do have much older players as well. It's not like they're all new blood coming into this roster. They do have a lot of new people, so with the leadership skills of like Davey and Swilko, hopefully they can progress and accelerate a little bit faster. So yeah, congrats. Atletico versus Legacy. Hard work does pay off. Open Division team coming up against contenders, getting that 4-0. That is an absolutely amazing result there for Legacy. I think this team is only going to improve during the later stages of the season, and the fact that they do beat Atletico now is a great achievement. Of course, Atletico aren't practicing as hard as other teams, so the fact that Legacy get a 4-0 clean sweep is fantastic news for them, and that's once again a pretty young roster, and they're only going to be improving throughout the rest of the season. So yeah, and even We had MJ on Twitter say that they're very used to being called the underdogs, and it makes him feel happy about winning more. When Elfish made that comment on the Contenders cast to say that these guys on paper probably do like the weakest team in the Contenders, and the fact that they do get that 4-0 means that their teamwork proved to be superior, their better factor in that match. So good on them, that was awesome. Questions for Atletico as well. I'm not sure how this roster can go into the future. Of course, like the last season, they said, oh, we weren't trying as hard, but they did end up making land. But that side was also way more powerful than this side that we have this season. So it's not going to be as easy as we have a bunch of great players, and we're not going to be dedicating as much as the other teams. It's going to be a lot more difficult if they're going to stay along with that mindset. So yeah, I'm not exactly 100% sure about their scrim positions at the moment, but hopefully they are going to be more successful towards the latter end of the season. Sydney Drop Bears versus Order. Once again, another disappointment. I thought that this was going to be a lot closer than what it was in that series. Order looked their best when they weren't on Goats. The initial start on Oasis, when they did have the Ash composition, when they have their carries put in the spotlight, I feel like that's when they shine the most. They have a bunch of mechanically gifted gods on that team. And the problem is that doesn't exactly help them the most in this type of meta, right? I feel like Sydney Drop Bears, even their roster throughout like the seasons, they're comparable to their counterparts in terms of on a 1-to-1 ratio, comparing them on paper. But the problem is they always seem to have much better teamwork, and with a meta that does reward teamwork, a lot of small intricacies and goats play, then Sydney Drop Bears are always going to be a very powerful force to be reckoned with. So them getting that 4-0, especially with a little bit of a shaky start towards the King of the Hill, coming back from that Oasis map, means that they are just head and shoulders above, probably, because theoretically this is when Drop Bears were the weakest, and I guess you can say the same with Order as well, because of the swap to Georgiation to the off support role. But of course, Sydney Drop Bears have had to change the main tank player, and they've usually been, I mean, I wouldn't say slow starters, but they've been the team to perform the most once they operate on land. That's when they're really, really powerful, and towards the regular season games, they don't lose. Actually, what am I saying? They're never weak in the regular season. They've had records that have yet to be broken in Contenders. So congratulations to Drop Bears for being incredibly consistent, and them getting this against Order. Well, that makes things a lot easier and pretty much secures first seed into the playoffs, because Order was always going to be their biggest threat. So we're going into next week's predictions. So 11th of March and the 13th of March, Ground Zero Gaming versus Legacy Esports. I think Ground Zero Gaming should probably have this. Theoretically, at least, after last loss, they could probably be down in the dumps, but at the end of the day, if they continue to lose, then their results or their chances of being even in the playoffs will diminish. So they really need to kick their ass into gear in order to really compete. And Legacy just coming off a 4-0, they're going to be very motivated to keep up that form, right? And they're very used to being underdogs. They don't have the most pressure under them at the moment, and they're going to be very comfortable with people saying, oh yeah, where everyone's predicting us to lose this, and once we do end up winning this, or I'm assuming this is how they end up feeling, then, you know, spotlight's going to be at us. We told everyone that they're wrong. This has happened in the past, and it feels absolutely great. So props to the Legacy boys. I know they're very hardworking. Stolen Picnic was on the podcast before, and he was telling us that, you know, they're all in a very supportive environment. So yeah, I think probably Ground Zero Gaming, I can't speak during this video, will take this. Probably a 3-1. I imagine Legacy will take a map, but I don't see them having enough firepower to compete with Ground Zero Gaming, and I think by then Ground Zero should have their full roster, and they should not look like they did last week up against Melbourne Mavericks. And yeah, there's not going to be much Legacy could probably dissect out of the VODs coming up from last week up against Mavs as well, because that was no way a reflection of how Ground Zero are. So yeah, I imagine Ground Zero probably take this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this perhaps goes to a best of 5. But I don't see Legacy putting the nail in the coffin and sealing the deal. Sydney Drop Bears versus Atletico. This is a no contest. Drop Bears take this flawlessly, a 4-0. Atletico have no chance, especially last week getting 4-0 against Legacy. I'm sorry, Drop Bears are by far the best looking team in the league at the moment, and Atletico are looking not very comfortable with where they are. So hopefully with more practicing and the power of love, Atletico can perhaps challenge Sydney Drop Bears, but I'm sure after this match they're going to amp it up a little bit after some experience up against the big boys. So yeah, 4-0 easy for Drop Bears. Order versus Mindfreak. Order take this. I wouldn't be too surprised actually if Mindfreak do take a map. We're looking at the matches before. Mindfreak just seemed to end up getting maps up against way better teams than what they are, and they just manage to get it under their feet every time. It's like there's some sort of magician, they escape and no one knows what happens. So I don't think that's going to be happening against Order. I think Order probably outmuscle Mindfreak way too much on an individual basis. I've said that in the past about Order, and sometimes they do choke, and they have in the past underestimated opponents, but I think coming off a loss, what we saw last season in Contenders as well, considering that they were a lot more powerful after their initial loss as well, I think their loss against Drop Bears will make them sort of Zenkai'd into this next match and make them more powerful up against Mindfreak. So 4-0 for Order. Blank Esports versus Melbourne Mavericks. This is going to be an absolute clash. Definitely match of the week for me. This is a very interesting match because when you look at the rosters paper to paper, they both have a bunch of potential. They certainly do. And I've doubted Melbourne Mavericks a lot in the past. I certainly have. Last week doesn't fill me with a bunch of confidence. I apologize with the bottom right how overlays are coming up with Steam and Origin. But, pardon me. Last week doesn't help me with analyzing how powerful they are at this current moment. I think both of these teams, once they get out of like standard GOATS competitions, look their most strongest. They both have pocket strategies that they can exploit, and I think it's going to be a more fast-paced tempo game than we've ever seen in Contenders so far within our region. And this is really going to solidify those high seedings come playoffs. So this is going to be an extremely important match. I honestly think Melbourne Mavericks are going to take this. I have doubted them in the past, and I think it's time for me to go on that train. I believe in Melbourne Mavericks this time. I think it will be very, very close, though. I don't imagine them getting a massive win over Blank Esports. And I think Blank Esports still need a little bit of time to mesh as well. What was their result last week? So they 3-1 Mindfreak, but Mindfreak always tend to get maps, right? So it's a little bit awkward there. The good thing is Blank Esports did manage to 4-0 Ground Zero at the start of the season too, which means that potentially these guys could kick it up a notch as well up against Mavs. So if Blank Esports beat Mavs like 3-1, I wouldn't be surprised either. I think this match is a complete coin toss, 50-50. I'm going to give it to Mavs, going the long haul. Mavs are accustomed to winning very long games, and after last season, I think they're going to be very hungry on being there. Mind you, Blank are going to be very hungry too. With the new infrastructure that's being led into Blank Esports, they can certainly power up. But yeah, I'm going to be extremely intrigued as to how those matches are going to be played out. They both have stylistic differences and similarities, and at the end of the day, it's going to be a match that is going to be incredibly important come this season in terms of the playoffs. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. This has been me, Racket. If you want more sort of analytical content from my side, feel free to tell me in the comments, and I will be happy to do more videos like this. I apologize once again for not having an overtime episode out tonight on Twitch, but I have made a video to give my personal thoughts out there. Anyway, so thank you guys. Subscribe to the YouTube channel down below, and take care.